नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धास्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धास्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धास्स। बुद्धं धम्मं संघं नमस्सामि। सो वेलकम को गहराई से समझने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं। तो सातवीं आज की जो क्लास है उसमें हम मुख्यतः 4 आर्य सत्यों की बात पूरी करेंगे। तो इसलिए मैंने फोटोग्राफ उसका डाला है जो सारनाथ में धम्मेक स्तूपा कहा जाता है, जहाँ पे कि भगवान बुद्ध का पहला प्रवचन कहा जाता है कि इसी स्थान पे हुआ था। और यहाँ पे सम्राट अशोक ने स्तूपा बनाया था जिसके कुछ रिमाइंडर बचा हुआ है। तो पहले थोड़ा सा रिकैप्चुलेशन, पिछली बार हमने प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद पढ़ा था और ये समझा था कि किस तरह से जो दूसरा आर्य सत्य है उसकी किस तरह से डिटेल में विवेचना की जाती है इन 12 लिंक्स के माध्यम से। अविद्या पच्चय असंखारा, इस तरह से पूरा लिंक चलते हैं 12। और इनके जो 3 लाइफ पैराडाइम है वो भी हमने देखा था कि अविद्या और संखार जो हैं पिछली लाइफ के, और उस संखार से नया लाइफ, नया कॉन्शियसनेस, विज्ञान, और ये प्रेजेंट उसके जो पास्ट लाइफ के जो रिजल्ट थे, विज्ञान और शरीर और इंद्रियां और फिर कांटेक्ट और फीलिंग्स, और फिर इन फीलिंग्स के आधार पे प्रेजेंट में हमने क्या किया, उस फीलिंग पे हमने कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड किया, वो डिटरमिन करेगा कि क्रेविंग करेंगे तो फिर ये सब चीज़ें होंगी, क्लिंगिंग होगी, बिकमिंग, एंड देन इट विल गिव राइज टू बर्थ एंड एजिंग एंड डेथ, एंड देन अगेन सेम थिंग, सॉरो, लेमेंटेशन एंड सो ऑन। तो इस तरह से हमने दोनों पैराडाइम समझे थे, मोमेंट टू मोमेंट पैराडाइम प्रतिक्षण का, और 3 जीवन का जो पैराडाइम है। एक बार और हमने समझा था कि जो सामान्य सीक्वेंस में कहा जाता है कि अविद्या के निरोध से सीक्वेंस चलता है, इसमें सफरिंग से शुरू करके सीक्वेंस चलाया था कि अगर सफरिंग के साथ अगर हम सजग रहें तो या तो सफरिंग से सफरिंग बढ़ सकती है या सफरिंग से सफरिंग समाप्त हो सकती है। अगर सजग रहें तो उसके 3 कारण, 3 तरीके बताए गए थे विभिन्न सूत्रों में। एक था श्रद्धा का, श्रद्धा के आधार पे। दूसरा था कि हम अपना कंडक्ट सुधार लें, हमें मालूम पड़े कि भाई मेरे गलत कंडक्ट के कारण दुख हो रहा है और हम अपना कंडक्ट सुधार लें। और तीसरी बात थी कि हम अपनी जो दुख की परिस्थिति है उस पर रिफ्लेक्ट करें कि क्यों हो रहा है, उसका क्या कारण है, और उसको जब करेंगे तो धीरे धीरे जब वो बात समझ में आने लगेगी तो इन तीनों माध्यम से हमारा चित्त में प्रमोद जागता है, प्रीति जागती है, और धीरे धीरे हमने जैसे देखा था ये सब इट लीड्स इवेंचुअली टू लिबरेशन फ्रॉम ऑल सफरिंग। तो ये दूसरे पैराडाइम भी प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद के डिफरेंट वेरिएशंस मैंने जैसे बताए थे, उनमें से ये 3 वेरिएशन काफ़ी इम्पॉर्टेंट हैं। फिर हमने ये सोचा था कि ये होमवर्क रखा था कि भाई अपने डे टू डे लाइफ में हम देखें प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद कैसे ऑपरेट करता है, सोसाइटी में कैसे ऑपरेट करता है। तो मेरे पास शायद एक आध का ही कोई रिस्पांस आया, ज़्यादा आया नहीं। तो अगर आप लोगों से कोई शेयर करना चाहे सो यू कैन डू दैट नाउ। क्या हम अपने दैनिक जीवन में देख पाते हैं कि किस तरह से जब भी मन में कोई भी इरिटेशन जागती है, कोई भी दुखद परिस्थिति जागती है या एक्साइटेशन जागती है, उसको हम कितना बैक ट्रेस कर सकते हैं, और क्या हम प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद के साइकिल को उससे समझ सकते हैं। और फिर हमने पिछली बार देखा था सोसाइटी में भी कैसे उसको इम्प्लीमेंट किया जा सकता है। तो कोई अगर शेयर करना चाहे सो यू आर वेलकम टू शेयर इट विद मी, देन वी कैन माइक है। Anybody would like to share? कि प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद का हमारे डे टू डे लाइफ में कोई आपने अगर अनुभव को एनालाइज किया हो या अभी करना चाहें, कैन सिट क्वाइटली फॉर 5 मिनट्स। उसका एक तरीका है कि एक तो बेस्ट तो ये रहता है कि जब हो रहा है अनुभव तब हम करें, लेकिन अगर हम रिट्रोस्पेक्टिव भी करें तो भी काफ़ी लाभ होता है। कोई भी घटना जो आपको जिसका बहुत स्ट्रांगली इम्पैक्ट हुआ हो, तो वी कैन सिट क्वाइटली फॉर 5 मिनट्स एंड देन रिमेंबर दैट, उसको मन में दोबारा उठाएं कि कोई घटना जिससे कि दुख हुआ हो, परेशानी हुई हो, एक्साइटमेंट हुई हो, तो उसको ट्रेस करें कहाँ से शुरू हुई और किस किस कारण से हुई। तो क्या वो प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद का जो नियम है उसके हिसाब से हुई या नहीं हुई। तो मेरे ख्याल से 5 मिनट हम शांति से बैठ जाते हैं एंड जस्ट ट्राई टू रिमेंबर एनीथिंग एंड देन वी कैन हैव सम डिस्कशन ऑन इट। बिकॉज बेसिक आइडिया यही है कि हम इससे हमारी जो प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद का रिफ्लेक्शन है, दैट इटसेल्फ इज़ द रियल मेडिटेशन। कहा जाता है कि अगर हम अपने जीवन में, दैनिक जीवन में प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद को ठीक से देख सकते हैं और उसकी इम्पर्सनैलिटी को समझ सकते हैं, फिनोमेना जो है इम्पर्सनल हैं, अपने आप हो रहे हैं, दैट इज़ द रियल मेडिटेशन। बाकी सब तो उसकी प्रिपरेशन है, जो हम सामान्यतः जिसको ध्यान कहते हैं, क्वेश्चन पे बैठ के कर रहे हैं, चित्त को शांत कर रहे हैं, समत का अभ्यास कर रहे हैं, वो सब अच्छी बात है। वो एक प्रिपरेशन है अपने जीवन में प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद को देखने की, क्योंकि उससे हमारा अनात्मबोध पुष्ट होता है। तो 5 मिनट हम शांत रह के देखते हैं, कोई पुरानी बात आपको याद आए उसको दोबारा से मन के पटल में ला के देखिए, उससे कितना कितना क्या अभी परिस्थिति होती है और क्या उसको बैक ट्रेस कर सकते हैं। So, would anybody do anything, remember anything and do the requisite analysis? Mahima, हमको map, she wants to ask something.
Hello.
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 Is it working? Yes. मेरा प्रश्न है, हेलो,
वहाँ पे कुछ एडजस्टमेंट।
हेलो सर।
हाँ बोलिए। हाँ अब आ गया हाँ जी हाँ जी।
हेलो। हेलो आ रहा है ना?
हाँ जी हाँ जी।
मेरा प्रश्न है कि मैंने एक बार इन्वेस्टिगेट किया था और मुझे ये नहीं पता चला कि कहाँ पर एंड करना है उसका, मतलब कितना जाना है करते करते करते। मेरा ऐसा हुआ था कि भय का संस्कार जाग गया लास्ट में और वो अपने आप ही टूट गया। लेकिन जो ये इन्वेस्टिगेशन का है, ये किस हद तक हमें जाना चाहिए?
हाँ, उस हद तक ताकि हमको ये स्पष्ट हो जाए कि जो संस्कार जागा है ये कुछ परिस्थिति बस जागा है और इसमें मेरा एज ए पर्सन कोई डायरेक्ट रोल नहीं है। जैसे भय का संस्कार है तो ये संस्कार हो गया, क्रेविंग, तन्हा जाग गई, तो वो किसी फीलिंग के कारण जागा होगा, और वो फीलिंग किसी इंद्रिय पे कांटेक्ट हुआ होगा, तो या तो मन में कोई विचार आया, या सामने कुछ देख लिया, सांप देख लिया, या मन में कोई पुरानी बात याद आ गई जिससे कि डर का, तो वो कांटेक्ट होगा तभी फीलिंग जागेगी और तभी तृष्णा जागेगी। तो ये चीज़ें अगर हम देख पाते हैं तो हमें मालूम पड़ता है कि ये सब अपने आप हो रहा है, इसमें मैं कुछ नहीं कर रहा हूँ। ये लगता है कि मैं डर रहा हूँ, ये अविद्या के कारण जो चली आ रही है। जब भी कोई मन में ऐसा विचार आएगा जिससे डर पैदा करता हो, तो उस कांटेक्ट के कारण फीलिंग अप्रिय होगी ही। अब वो अप्रिय फीलिंग पे हम उसको देख नहीं पाए ठीक से, तो डर जाग गया, या बेचैनी जाग गई, या गुस्सा जाग गया। तो ये फीलिंग को ठीक से नहीं देख पाने के कारण ऐसा हुआ। तो वो फीलिंग जो थी वो किसी कांटेक्ट के कारण आई, कहीं सेंस बेस था। जैसे मन में अगर जागी तो मन उसका सेंस बेस था, तो वो यहाँ से हमें महसूस हो सकती है अगर हम प्रेजेंट उसकी कॉज एंड इफेक्ट की बात करते हैं। तो जब हम इस तरह से देखते हैं तो हमको मालूम पड़ने लगता है कि ये सब चीज़ें एक नियम के अनुसार हो रही हैं, कॉज इफेक्ट रिलेशनशिप। ये कारण है, फिर उसका ये इफेक्ट है, ये कारण है, ये इफेक्ट है। तो इस तरह से देखते हैं तो पता चलता है कि इसमें मैं और मेरा कोई रोल, डायरेक्टली रोल नहीं है। उस सेंस में रोल है कि अविद्या थी और मैंने फीलिंग को नहीं देख पाया, या देख पाई, मैं देख नहीं पाई कि फीलिंग क्या है, और मैंने उस पर रिएक्ट कर लिया, फिर जाके पता चला कि रिएक्शन हो गया। तो जब हम इस तरह से इसको तोड़ तोड़ के देखते हैं प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद के हिसाब से, यहाँ से इधर, इधर से इधर, तो मालूम पड़ने लगता है कि ये सब चीज़ें तो ऑटोमेटिक ही हो रही हैं। फीलिंग के कारण क्रेविंग होगी कि नहीं, ये इस पर निर्भर करता है कि मैंने फीलिंग को ठीक से सती के हिसाब, सम्मा सती से देखा कि नहीं देखा। तो फिर पता चल जाएगा, हाँ मैंने ठीक से नहीं देखा, मेरे मन में उस फीलिंग के प्रति रिएक्शन हो गया। तो वी कैन नो this is the point where the reaction took place. So then what will we do? We will try to be more mindful. So we learn that my sati is not strong, so I should practice more and make my sati strong. So that is what we learn from these things. We say make my sati more just for the sake of understanding. Actually it is a matter of realizing how the practice should be done, what practice is suitable for me. So different type of Krishna arising will require different type of practice that we'll study in the Eightfold Path.
But the fear which arose, I was aware of that fear.
Then it would, if you are aware objectively for some time, then it will go.
Then it went.
Yeah,
but
then it will go. So you learn. So what we learn, we don't start getting too happy about that, but we learn, I have observed it without getting afraid of fear, if I may use that word, and therefore the fear subsided. So we learn that sati is really very good, and if I develop more sati, then I can be afraid, I can be aware even of the feeling, then even fear will not arise, isn't it? So now fear arose, then you observed it, then it went away. So if we are more mindful and we observe the feeling, then we say, oh, feeling, unpleasant feeling, and then fear will not arise. So that's how we avoid the arising itself. That is what is meant by nirodha. Last time we studied, nirodha means avoiding the arising of it. So if our sati is strong and that is samma sati, then we will be able to stop it at feeling itself. So that is
what
the
should be the last, I mean, to which
last is ending of such suffering, no? Last is, yeah, what is our whole objective of our practice is to end suffering. Suffering arose for a moment, there was fear, I was able to observe it and it ended. Fine.
Then I need not go further more for investigation.
No, one can go that if suffering, or why did suffering arise itself, then one can investigate that. No? The suffering arose because the feeling was there and I didn't notice that feeling. The mind reacted to it before I became aware. I became aware only of the reaction, not of the feeling. So then we learn, okay, let me make my mindfulness more strong so that I can become aware of the feeling itself.
Thank you.
Sir, I'll also ask a question. Sir, sometimes what I have felt in last few days, that when the action is on, when the things are going on, though I am able to be aware of the sensation of the mental state and even the body's sensation, but I cannot keep the anatta, non-self thing in my mind, because for that I have to be at peace. I find it difficult to do when the communication or interaction is happening.
Okay. Yeah, it is true. It will be a bit difficult, but it is essentially a question of how deep one has understood this notion of impersonality. If it is understood once, really thoroughly, we don't have to remember it again and again, isn't it?
Right.
You have understood that if you put your finger in that hole there, it will give current. Maybe I've had it once or twice, then you don't have to remember. The moment you see it, you'll put your finger behind. So that's the way. If you really understand it thoroughly, then we'll say there's a reaction, you understand it happens, that's okay. It's a conditioned phenomena, it has arisen, it is possible.
That thing, yes, that thing is okay, that I'm able to catch up, but definitely that...
So the fact that even the arising of that should not happen, then you have to go behind, go to one step behind.
Right.
So see the contact, see the sense door. Say there is somebody has said something, or you've seen something or heard something, then there is this contact at the sense door, seeing or hearing, and that gave rise to feeling. Quite often we are not able to see that feeling because we think that we should observe body. No, that's not good. That's not what it is really. We should observe the feeling of that phenomena. Oh, these words are painful. This smell is very nasty. This picture is very dangerous. So that is something is beautiful, it is a pleasant feeling. Something is ugly, it is unpleasant feeling, isn't it? Something is very melodious, it gives a pleasant feeling. Something is very noisy, it gives unpleasant feeling. So that is an unpleasant feeling at the ear, pleasant feeling at the ear, unpleasant feeling at the nose, unpleasant feeling at the eye. So if we see it in that manner, we try to be mindful. Oh, this scene, I don't like it. It's unpleasant. And if you make a note of unpleasant feeling, then the next step will not take place.
So another thing about anxiety, like one thing I have realized that sometimes the sense of anxiety is there even when there is no reason for it. Like when some people give you reason to be anxious, give you reason to be fearful, and I totally disagree with them. I have no reason. I mean, I don't agree, so I don't believe I have to be fearful or anxious. But still, deep down, I could feel some anxiety. I don't know why in this.
These are the latent tendencies. This is what is meant by Anushya Klesh. There is a latent tendency. Consciously, we have understood there is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be anxious about. But subconsciously, deep inside, the tendency of anxiety, tendency of fear is still there. So that will create some disturbance inside, and if you become aware, okay, that's all right, this is a latent tendency. That's why knowing is important. You know, this is a latent tendency carried over in my chitta stream, as we have studied, from I don't know how many lives this stream is carrying on. Okay, this is a reason, good, it's an opportunity for me to observe it and let it go. So that way the latent tendencies will eliminate in that manner only. There is no other way you can eliminate them. You become aware of them and let them go.
Here sometimes is so intense that person, even if he is aware of everything, is not able to control it.
Yeah.
I've seen patients, one person was doing meditation, he was absolutely peaceful. Suddenly, without any reason, fear came, and it was so intense that by any means he could not control it. Ultimately, he has to swallow a few tablets to control that fear.
Yeah, it can happen. If there is some strong past sankhara, fear may be very overwhelming, but it depends on how strong is the practice. If the practice and understanding are strong, most time it is possible. If it is not possible, okay, one takes a recourse to some auxiliary support system, walks up, gets up, goes out, sees things properly. And if it is such an extreme case, then medicine is needed, then that also maybe. In some case it may be needed, I don't say it won't, but generally my own experience with great fears has been that if one is has a clear understanding, firstly, that's very, very important. If the understanding and faith in the teachings is not strong, then one will be shaken. If the understanding is clear and the faith in the teaching is clear and strong, then arising of even intense sankharas can be handled without getting overwhelmed, or at least going to the extent of having to go to a hospital or something. But sometimes mind is not strong, so that can happen.
When we talk about sati, does it mean the continuous awareness about whatever is happening in the mind?
Yeah. And body.
And the body. Yeah. Continuous awareness. And wherever that continuity is broken, that means that meditation is not really up to the mark.
No, we don't use that statement. When it is broken and we become aware of that it is broken, that's fine. Mm-hmm. So if we take it personally, then there will be problem. So okay, we have lost in certain thoughts and this, and then we become aware of it. Fine. So we become aware that the mind had wandered away. So that itself is okay. But as we practice more and more, the duration of wandering, the frequency of wandering comes down.
So for example, if I become aware about my thought now, now does it mean that now I have to understand why the thought came? So I start analyzing that itself while I am meditating?
It depends. If there is some thought which is coming again and again.
Again and again.
Then only, not otherwise.
Yeah, if it comes again and again.
If some thought is coming again and again and again, that's a clear case of need for investigation.
And
investigation may go right up to the home, right up to the childhood. It may go right up to that, because some thoughts can be carried over for years.
That's right.
So then, if the thought just arises, we observe and it goes away, fine. That's the difference between chittanupassana and dhammanupassana. In chittanupassana means a thought has arisen, it could be anger, it could be craving, and I just observed, craving has arisen, and be with it for a few seconds, and it's gone. And there's no need to investigate, it's okay. But what sometimes happens is a thought of anger coming, and you observe, and then it goes. After a few minutes, again the same thought, then the same thought. Tomorrow you practice, again the same thought. You practice for 1 week, 10 days, 2 months, same thought again. Then there's a need for deep investigation. Why is it happening? What is the problem? What is the root of that thought? So then that investigation is very helpful. Because then quite often it is a question of wrong view. We don't have a right view about life. We don't have the understanding of Sammaditthi properly, and therefore with a wrong view we are continuing to try to remove the thought without understanding the root cause, isn't it? If there is ignorance on certain aspect, ignorance doesn't mean that it will be in every dimension of our existence. There can be ignorance in certain dimensions, and certain dimensions may be wise. So then we have to investigate where exactly, which kind of ignorance is captivating me. So then that kind of investigation helps. If the thoughts are coming again and again of any particular kind, if it is greed, or if it is anger, it is ill will, or restlessness is happening again and again, all the 5 nivarnas which we talk of, 5 hindrances in the meditation, if they happen again and again on the same issue again and again, then certainly we should investigate.
Patients who have compulsive disorder, they are not able to control the thought by any means.
Yeah, for them medications. For that medication is needed. For them some element of medication is needed.
There are people who have without any reason suicidal thoughts,
Yeah, I mean the suicidal thoughts should not be attempted to be removed by meditation only, because it can be dangerous. We should always give some medication to bring down the intensity, and then one can supplement it. It can be used as a supplement, not as a sole solution. It can be dangerous, because suddenly a burst of suicidal thought arises and the person commits suicide, then what can we do? And it has happened with so many young people I know. So when there is a grave situation like OCD or suicidal tendencies, medication should be done. And then you should supplement it with the meditation, and especially with cognitive therapy, which is, you can say, right view. In those cases, right view is very helpful. What they call these days as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, it is actually understanding teachings of the Buddha properly. If you understand that properly, if the view is right, many things can be sorted out by that purpose. So meditation plus right view and some element of calming down of the mind is helpful. Fine, so let's move further then for today. We have been studying these noble truths. पिछली बार हमने 3 चीज़ें हम पढ़ चुके हैं. दुख है, दुख का कारण है और दुख का निरोध है. प्रतीत्य समुत्पाद में उनकी डिटेल भी हमने पढ़ ली थी पिछली बार, 2nd and 3rd नोबल ट्रूथ की. तो अब हम 4th नोबल ट्रूथ पे आते हैं. इट इज दुख निरोध गामिनी प्रतिपदा. व्हाट इज द वे ऑफ प्रैक्टिस फॉर सेसेशन ऑफ दुख. किस तरह से दुख का समाप्त होता है. सेसेशन का, जैसे मैंने पिछली बार भी कहा था, नॉन अराइजिंग ऑफ दुख. और इफ इट इज अरिजन, इट नेचुरली एंड्स. वी आर नॉट डूइंग एनी स्पेसिफिक थिंग टू एंड इट, जस्ट अदर देन ऑब्जर्वेशन. तो हाँ बेटा.
Last time we spoke about nirodha, which does not mean cessation.
No, mean ending. Does not mean ending. Cessation is the nearest correct word for it. It does not mean that we apply some force and end it, or that suffering is arisen and then it will cease. That is essentially cessation of one kind. The higher order of cessation would be where suffering does not arise.
Which means it's not existent in the first place.
You see, if you remember what I had said, with the non-arising of ignorance, there will be non-arising of sankhara. Avidya pacchaya sankhara tha na? So that is the true meaning, as the Venerable Payutto had explained, जैसे हमने कहा. Normally तो हम यही कहते हैं, with the cessation of ignorance, there is cessation of sankhara and so on. Which is, in a conventional sense, it is true. Which means ignorance has already produced its effect, and then we are observing it and getting away with it. But if ignorance has been removed already, then ignorance is not going to arise, and then sankharas will not arise. So that is the ultimate ending of suffering. Because otherwise what is happening? Suffering is happening, and then we are seeing it and it ends, isn't it? So that also is cessation in the sense that suffering arose and it ended. But what the Buddha's meaning was, complete, as remainderless cessation, as he says, no trace itself of, no arising even, isn't it? So as we, for example, we just now were discussing, if we can be so mindful as to see the functioning of the chitta and functioning of the senses, we hear something, we know unpleasant feeling, and stop at that, then suffering will not arise at all. There will be unpleasant feeling experience, but no suffering. So that is what is meant by really the true remainderless cessation of suffering, as we say. Avidya शेष विराग निरोधा, ऐसा कहा जाता है ना. So that is the meaning, remainderless cessation, which means nothing, no कोई उसका अंश मात्र भी नहीं रह गया जो arise हो और फिर समाप्त हो. So that will be the state of a fully enlightened person. He doesn't allow the suffering to arise and then cease. There is no arising whatsoever. For all of us, suffering arises, we see, then it ceases. So obviously we are following in that direction. So we can, as we practice more and more, we come to a situation where under certain conditions it does not arise, but in other conditions it continues to arise. So the extent to which we have been able to see through something, somebody has, say, very little attachment to money, then money loss will not create suffering for him. But he has very strong attachment to name and fame, then that will affect him strongly. So we can see, it's not that Vidya is ended once and for all the possible situations. There are so many tanhas, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhav. So you may be trapped by somebody, trapped here, somebody trapped there. So when it is completely remainderless cessation, then there will be no arising of suffering. So it is said that Arant is in that state. That is the meaning of fully liberated person.
Sir, taking you back a little bit, you said कि अगर recurring thought हो तो उसको investigate करना चाहिए. How should one go about investigating? Okay.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. So this Noble Eightfold Path, let us try to understand, because that will encompass your question also. So this is I found a good picture of a 8-petaled flower. So I thought there should be a good way to indicate these 8 paths. Sometimes they are bracketed in 3 categories. आप लोगों को सबको मालूम है अधिकतर को. These 3 categories: wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, they come under ethical behavior. Then wise striving, wise mindfulness, wise concentration comes under mental training. And wise view and wise resolve come under wisdom, which means removal of ignorance. So these are sometimes put in 3 categories: Shil, Samadhi and Prajna. And I have translated Samma as wise. To say it right creates a kind of difficult situation. Yeah, they use right. Jan Sumitra says perfect. He says right is not a good word, so he should say perfect. Some say wise, some say other things. So there are different people. It is up to us to understand. Basically, idea is that our view should be in accordance with the reality. So whatever we call it, or our speech should be such that it neither causes harm to me nor to others. Basically, that is the idea. Because overall, हमारा सारा कोशिश यही है to remove suffering, isn't it? So all our actions, whether of speech or physical actions or livelihood, or the way we look at the world, or the way we think and the way we make decisions, the way we put effort, the way we concentrate the mind, it should be in such a manner that it does not increase our suffering and it does not cause suffering to others. So that will be a full description. Samyak means that, but to write all that will be a full sentence or a paragraph. So we use some words, right, or peaceful, some people say, or wise. So you can see whichever word you feel comfortable, you can use really. But that's why Pali is helpful. Samyak is very Sammaditthi, Samma Sankappo, Samma. So if you understand that word Samma, it has a very deep meanings. It is Sam means which is balanced. Samyak, yeah. In Sanskrit or Hindi we use Samyak. Samyak Vani, Samyak Darshan and so on. Now Darshan again creates a difficulty. So we have to, language has its difficulties. So that's why I find Pali words are very powerful if you can remember them. Sammaditthi, Samma Sankappo. Now Sankappo gives you an idea. It's a sankalp. क्या आपकी एक्सप्रेशन है, किस तरह का काम करना चाहते हैं. Samma Vacha is quite clear. Samma Kammanto means end of action, when it manifests in the field. Samma Ajivo, आजीविका है, काफ़ी clear है. Samma Vayamo, effort, we are putting, जैसे physical व्यायाम है उसी तरह mental व्यायाम है. Samma Sati, we understand it. Samma Samadhi, this mind is collected, samahit chitta है. So this way, if you remember the Pali word, then you don't need to bother about what is the translation. But since we often forget, so
wise resolve.
Yeah, we'll come into that. We'll go through each one of them because that's the crux of the whole practice.
वहाँ पे मतलब right thought लिखा जाता है तो वो resolve.
You can call it right resolve or right thought. Thought is not really a correct meaning of sankalp. It is sankappo. Sankalp means क्या आपकी किस तरह का आपके विचारधारा है, किस तरह के आपके सोचने का तरीका है. आप धन संचय की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं कि धन को छोड़ने की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं. That is the first one, nikham of sankappo. We'll come to that. We'll come to each one of them because they are the crux of our whole practice. So we'll come to them one by one. So we'll today start with this one thing. Though I felt some pleasant feelings on seeing the flower, I realized that this is not really a good simile for that. For the Eightfold Path, a good simile would be something of this kind. It is a rope in which you have 8 strands. So they are all intertwined. If even one strand is weak, the rope will break. So you have to have all the 8 strands have to be strong. So that's a good way of understanding. If you have seen those cables, केबल होती है रोप केबल, जिससे कि लिफ्ट क्रेन होती है, कितनी स्ट्रांग है, उसकी एक तार भी अगर वीक हो गई ना, so there will be catastrophe. So that is what it is really implication, that all these 8 things are intertwined. They are not individual petals. जैसे यहाँ पे वो कुछ तृष्णा जाग गई शायद फ्लावर को देख के उनको. So these are 8 independent things. It's not really 8 independent because they intertwine with each other. They influence each other very strongly. So I thought this will be a better picture. This is a good simile for understanding the interconnectionness, interdependence of all the things. That freedom from suffering will not come by just one. All the 8 have to be strong. So we'll discuss today Sammaditthi, wise view. तो इसका अगर पाली भी शब्द याद रखेंगे ना तो अच्छा होगा, because it has its beauty in terms of understanding the real meaning of it. दिट्ठी शब्द जो अलग से अगर कहते हैं उसका मतलब होता है रॉन्ग व्यू. बाय इटसेल्फ दिट्ठी मीन्स रॉन्ग व्यू. दृष्टि है जो उसकी ठीक से नहीं देख रहा है. सम्मादिट्ठी मीन्स इज सीइंग इट प्रॉपरली. नाउ सीइंग इन द figurative sense, seeing the world properly, understanding everything properly. And what is the main issue of our discussion is suffering. So that we understand the damn thing properly and we don't try to run away from it. So that's why the key thing is Sammaditthi. And the way classically the Lord Buddha defines it as Dukkhe Jnanam, Dukkha Samudaya Jnanam, Dukkha Nirodha Jnanam, Dukkha Nirodha Gamani, Patipatti Jnanam. Which means knowing the 4 noble truths, basically. Knowing it thoroughly, understanding the 4 noble truths. किसका? अच्छा. क्या कुछ टाइम बाहर हो जाता है? Technology is quite a challenge, really. मैकेनिकल थिंग भी ठीक है.
सर, आई हैव अ क्वेश्चन. कॉमन अंडरस्टैंडिंग में ऐसा एक इंप्रेशन बनता है कि पहले शील, फिर समाधि, फिर प्रज्ञा.
हाँ, मतलब फ्रॉम द पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू ऑफ प्रैक्टिस
path, is it sequential, is it
no, it goes in cycles. It's only, that's why I showed those 8 strands together. They're all intertwined. It will become clear when we discuss wise view further. Of course, some are more important than others. There's no doubt about it. Right view is seen to be the most important thing. But it doesn't mean the others are not important, because if that is weak, we will not be right. They influence each other. अगर आपकी शील पुष्ट नहीं है तो आपका व्यू तो ठीक हो ही नहीं सकता.
इसका मतलब सबसे पहले शील होना चाहिए.
मतलब फ्रॉम द प्रैक्टिस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू का इसीलिए कहा जाता है कि भाई शील सबसे पहले पुष्ट करो. लेकिन कितने पुष्ट करोगे? यू कांट मेक इट परफेक्ट. सो इसीलिए कहा जाता है कि आप अच्छा एक यू स्टार्ट ट्रेनिंग योरसेल्फ. जब हम शील भी लेते हैं, सिक्खा पदम समाधि आमी, आई अंडरटेक द ट्रेनिंग टू एब्सटेन फ्रॉम किलिंग. सो इट्स अ ट्रेनिंग टू बी डन, एंड right view is the real thing which will make it training perfect. Because if the view is right, you cannot do anything. You cannot break a shield. It's impossible. If you understand truly that breaking shield is a cause of suffering, why the hell should you do it?
Is it not that right view will come only once you have that?
No, it works both ways. It works both ways, yeah. It works both ways. That's why it is said. It's not a like a step-by-step progression in that manner. It is a spiral. It goes like that.
Your rope example is perfect.
Yeah, that's how it works. Because unless we have a right view, you will not have right. We will not have truly established in Sheela. तब वो जोर जबरदस्ती वाली हो जाती है. पुलिस के डर से शील पालन कर रहे हैं. But if you have right view, तो फिर हम अपने आप कर रहे हैं. मालूम है हमको, उससे दुख बनता है. क्यों करेंगे? We have understood that theory. So let's see one by one, and it will automatically become more and more clear as we understand. That's why in the teaching of the Buddha, whenever he talks eightfold path, he starts from Sammaditthi. He doesn't start from Sammavacha. That we start in the meditation retreat. We teach that because that अगर वो वाणी सम्यक नहीं होगी तो फिर आगे काम करना बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाएगा. आपको रिट्रीट में बैठ के एक दूसरे गाली गलौची करते रहेंगे तो मुश्किल हो जाएगी, है ना. और अगर वहाँ पे जो रिट्रीट में जाके भी हमारा ध्यान नहीं रहेगी कि कहाँ मौका मिले और मैं कुछ चोरी करके निकलूँ यहाँ सेंटर से, तो फिर तो कुछ नहीं हो पाएगा. तो इसलिए वो शील का एक वो बना देते हैं, ए काइंड ऑफ ए रेस्ट्रिक्शन. इट्स ए काइंड ऑफ सेल्फ इम्पोज्ड रेस्ट्रिक्शन की अच्छा मैं 10 दिन तो मैं ही करूँगा. जब हमने जेल में शुरू किया था सब लोगों को, अब ये तो नहीं कह सकते ना कि अब आप ये सब छोड़ दो, उनका भी 10 दिन के लिए छोड़ना पड़ेगा, बाकी जो तुम्हें करना वो देख लेंगे. So for these 10 days when you are in the retreat, we used to tell them, please, you have to follow these. You cannot do any intoxication, you cannot do any stealing of each other's things, you cannot abuse each other, you cannot hit each other, because they are all used to do everything. So वो उनको रिक्वेस्ट की गई पहले प्री ओरिएंटेशन में कि भाई ये ज़रूर फॉलो करना तभी आगे बढ़ेंगे, बिकॉज दैट वाज एब्सोल्युटली एसेंशियल. बट व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट people who have been meditating for years, then this is how we should start. And in fact Buddha starts always like that, Sammaditthi. That is the first. And what does it mean? You can see why it is. It's very easy to see, because Sammaditthi का मतलब क्या है कि दुखे ज्ञानम, कि दुख को समझें, दुख समुदय ज्ञानम, दुख के ओरिजिन को समझें, भाई क्यों हो रहा है, दुख निरोधे ज्ञानम, समझें जहाँ दुख का निरोध हो सकता है, और दुख का निरोध का क्या मार्ग है वो समझें. Obviously, if you don't understand it, there is no way that we can move on in the path. Now, what does that understanding mean? It's not just intellectual understanding. That is the first part of it. जिसे pariyatti कहा गया. The first part is understanding the basic theory of it. तो जैसे पहले आर्य सत्य में कहा कि भाई ये समझें कि दुख है, क्योंकि सामान्यता अधिकतर लोगों को ये नहीं समझ में आता कि ये दुख है. Unless there is a grave suffering, we don't realize that excitement is also dukkha, for example. Most people will not realize it. So to be able to see that so-called extremely pleasant experiences can also be cause of suffering is the very first thing. Understanding the truth of dukkha, that in the sensory domain there is nothing which can give us permanent happiness. Now if we don't understand it, then we try to manipulate the life somehow or the other. चलो अभी ये चीज़ खाएंगे, इससे मुझको सुख मिलेगा, इसके बाद फिर ये खा लेंगे, फिर वो खा लेंगे, फिर वो खा लेंगे. We will continue and maximize our happiness and make sure that there is no possibility of unhappiness. It's not possible. You can try it out. So this is it may seem very simple कि दुख है, हाँ भाई मालूम है यार, लोग दुखी होते रहते हैं. नानक जी ने भी कहा था नानक दुखिया सब संसार, लेकिन तो समझो यार, it says a very deep thing. He's not talking of obvious suffering of illness and death and other things. He's talking of the whole realm of this existence is such that it cannot give you complete satisfaction. Because अगर हम वो नहीं समझेंगे तो फिर हम इसी डोमेन में ढूंढते रहेंगे ना सारे solution. We'll try to find all the solutions within this domain, and then there's no possibility of moving ahead. So apparently a simple thing like दुखा दुखता is to be understood. So that's why उसके लिए क्या करना है, वो हर एक सत्य के बारे में उन्होंने कहा 3 तरह से उसको रियलाइज करना है. पहले तो उसकी स्टेटमेंट समझनी है, भाई एक मतलब क्या है, फिर उसको प्रैक्टिस क्या करना है उसके लिए, और फिर अगर प्रैक्टिस हो जाएगी पूरी, हमें पता कैसे चलेगा पूरी तरह प्रैक्टिस हो गई, तो उसको कहा प्रतिवेदन. pativedhaning जैसे पाली में लिखा शब्द ना, that you have penetrated into it. So the first is the understanding the basic theory, उसको pariyatti कहा गया कि हम इस थ्योरी तो समझ में आए, फिर उसको प्रैक्टिस करें. तो अब पहले ट्रुथ की प्रैक्टिस क्या करनी है, it has to be understood. He is not saying you should remove it. He is not saying that you should try to remove the suffering. He is saying it should be understood. And when do you say that this first truth is truly understood? When you know that I have understood it thoroughly, completely. Now what does one do about it? How does one understand it? So to understand anything, we have to see that, isn't it? अगर हमको एक एक्सपेरिमेंट करना है साइंस का लैब में, या किसी भी चीज़ को समझना है, एक कंप्यूटर को समझना है, तो उसको हमको देखना पड़ेगा ठीक से क्या है वो. So similarly, to be understood means what is suffering? We have to understand it by experience. Actually, when the suffering is happening, then we experience what does it mean to suffer. There is an unpleasant mental feeling, there is an unpleasant bodily feeling, and we try to observe and understand it and see. Once you have said that this is the truth of dukkha, not something which is unexpected, something which has happened due to some capricious god or something. This is the thing which is bound to happen in this realm. And as वो जान चाह का कोई कहता मैं बहुत दुख से छा रहा हूँ, तो कौन सा कारण है? कारण ये है कि तुम पैदा हुए हो, that's it. Since you are born, you will suffer. That's why if you see in the patitya samutpad, birth, jati pi dukkha, birth leads to suffering. So that is the absolute cause. Everything else is a secondary cause. So if we understand in that sense, that is the understanding part of it. But practically speaking, what does it mean? That when we have an experience of dukkha, we just sit with it and experience what does it mean to be, what does it mean to suffer. So there is a physical distress, there is a mental distress, and we just sit with it and develop the forbearance, या शांति इतनी हो या इतनी क्षमता हो हमारी में कि हम देख रहे हैं क्या हो रहा है. हाँ, इसी को दुख कहते हैं. भगवान कहते हैं ये प्रथम आर्य सत्य का मुझे दर्शन हो रहा है. Now the moment we start accepting it and not trying to run away from it, the moment we start doing it, slowly and slowly the whole process, first, second, third, automatically moves on. If we can move on, sit under it, that's why Ajahn Sumitra says understanding means to sit under it. So you just sit under it, don't try to run away from there, just be aware of the suffering. Okay, this is suffering, and this is what it does to the mind, this is what it does to the body, and this is the kind of turbulent thoughts which arise, and this is the kind of mental phenomena which arise, and just sit with it, don't do anything. Try to allow the natural intelligence of the body to understand it. And once if we are able to do it properly, now that suffering could be anger, that suffering could be excitement, that suffering could be fear, that suffering could be depression of any kind. It doesn't matter. Then if you can sit under it really and try to understand it in the sense that I want to understand what is going on. So just experience the body and mind and see that all kinds of dramas happening of different intensity, changing, this happening, that happening, this thought, that thought. You just sit with it. And slowly the mind calms down. And if you have understood the basic teaching, if the pariyatti is clear, then the cause also becomes evident. Oh, this is the Trishna which has caused this suffering. Or this is the feeling which arose and I reacted to it and created suffering. So then you become clear about the origin of this dukkha also. And just being aware of that origin, and if you can leave aside that craving, put it aside, you become free from suffering. So all the three things gets immediately realized if we can really sit with the suffering. And then you can say, oh, I have understood. Because if I have understood suffering, I have understood all of them. So then the second is truth of the origin of dukkha, and what is it to be done? To be abandoned. So once we have discovered in this process of experiencing suffering that this is the truth of my attachment to my family, or attachment to my wealth, or attachment to my name and fame, these are typical things which create problems. So this is the cause. Now that will not come by reading a book. That will come by, you may have read a book and I may have understood it there, but when it actually happens, I forget it. So what is to be done is, when it actually happens, then I sit with it. I sit under it. I find that a very good way to remember. Okay, sit under it and see what does it mean. And then, if my theoretical background is strong, it will automatically, as the mind settles down a little bit, it's only settling down. There's no kind of transformation happening, just settling down a little bit. Then that insight will emerge. Oh, see, I am attached to my name and fame, and that's how he called me. He told me you are an idiot, and I am getting angry about it. So, and you can see that implication of that attachment, and you put it down. Okay, I don't need to be attached to my name or fame or my money or my son or my husband or my father or mother, whatever. So you just see that. What does it mean to put down? It doesn't mean you throw it away. As Jan Amro explained to us in the talk which he gave, you remember? So if you are grasping something, when he says you abandon it or you put it down, it means just put it down here. It doesn't mean you throw it, which means you don't grasp it. If you have craving, you understand there is craving. You don't have to remove it by pushing it around, because pushing around is again craving. It will be an aversion of another kind. So just understand, oh, there is still craving in my mind about money. That's it. And that's the cause of suffering. Just that realization is sufficient to create an inner repugnance towards that craving, and slowly it's like wiping out a stone with a sandpaper. Slowly that gets reduced.
So
for that moment you have abandoned it. When you let it go, and you have abandoned it, because you accept it, that's the way it is.
Sir,
and then the truth of the cessation is realized.
Sometimes what happens is you understand that this thing hurt me because of this. I'm feeling bad because of this, but the reason behind it is because it's hit your ego. Abandonment of ego gets very difficult.
Yeah,
as in
the word is really pahana. It actually means you just let it be, I would say. The pahan actually is to say let go. This is the word which the Thai tradition people use. You let go of that cause. Let go means just understand that is the cause. It won't abandon gives the feeling as if you have removed that totally. It doesn't mean that. It means you've just seen that, and you have seen it and accepted that is the situation. And that acceptance itself has the power of reducing its impact on the mind, and then slowly the cessation will happen. Slowly we will move towards the next stage of truth of the cessation of dukkha. So that's, I think, within all of our experience, whenever we are able to observe certain strong craving or tanha arising, whichever kind, aversion or craving, and slowly it will cease. It may take more time or less time, but if we are persistent with him, and that's the very tough thing, it's not easy. You are suffering and you are not doing anything. You are not going to the fridge and taking out a chocolate and eating, or you are not going and starting a television. You are just sitting under it. It needs courage. You are willing to go through the fire of suffering. That itself, that resolve itself is so powerful. And then you sit, and it doesn't matter. We fail, mind keeps on going here and there for a long time. It doesn't matter. Just we sit. The very fact that we have resolved to work it out is strong enough to make the process work. So we immediately see the first three noble truths operating in practice. And then, of course, we can reflect what was the path which was followed. I was being observant, and then you can relate it to paticca samutpad. You can also relate it to the remaining factors of the remaining seven factors of the eightfold path. Because if the remaining seven factors are not strong, you will not be able to abandon it. If there is a very strong breakage of Shila in my character, suffering will never end. I will know. It will again and again come. I have done this wrong, I have done this wrong, I have done this wrong. So then you know, oh, this is where the eightfold path is pestering me. I have not really taken care of it. And that's how the path becomes, what is it called? Self-corrective. If we are, only thing which is really needed is to sit through the suffering experience.
But mind wanders so much that you cannot actually go through all the processes.
You don't have to do anything. I don't have to go through anything. Mind wanders, I have to just accept it. That's all.
No, but just understand kar diya ki it wasn't that big an issue. My ego made it that big in the first place. Second, then to sit through the entire process that it leads to be realized and to be utna hota hi nahi, mind wander hi ho jata hai.
So we allow that also to happen. We have that patience. Okay, mind has wandered away. I'm just observing it, and I sit. Mind has wandered away. Then it comes back, and then slowly. That's why what happens is that sometimes it needs time, and we often don't have that time, and then we kind of try to brush it aside. Then we can do it retrospectively also. That's okay. I understand, as a householder we all have our limitations, but we can do it retrospectively. Just before sleeping that night, we can recall the whole incident and see what happened. Yeah, this is what happened. Okay, let me experience it again. And you create that scene again, and again that suffering will happen, and now you are free, and you really, and that is real meditation, you see. This is the real meditation. Just doing a particular kind of a practice again and again is helpful in calming down the mind. But if you have to develop insight, that is what is really needed. So if you're not able to sit in the cushion throughout the day, but you actually do this in the day, it is huge. It's a huge work. Because you are actually penetrated the truth. So we have to see from the point of view of insight development, vipassana, this is what it is. From the point of view of samadhi, calming down the mind, then you have to sit definitely on the cushion. It's not easy to calm down the mind when there is turmoil around. For that we have to sit on the cushion, do something, calm down the mind, do some chanting, take some object of meditation and focus, and then tranquility will come slowly and slowly.
Is partial, what should I say, just to understand and partially abandoning,
it's
is that also enough?
Obviously much better than not doing it. Obviously much better than going out and eating something and drinking something, or
diverting
diverting it. You're actually trying to face it, isn't it? That's why I said my understanding and experience says that the very resolve to do it is so powerful, because it is samma sankappo. You're actually working on the eightfold path in its entirety. You're doing samma vayamo, you're putting effort. I will try to find out why this defilement has arisen. So all these factors are working simultaneously when you resolve कि नहीं मुझे इसको दूर नहीं करना है, कि अब परेशानी हो रही हो तो चलो जल्दी से कुछ कर लो, ये कर लो, वो कर लो, भजन कर दो, सांस को तेज कर लो, कुछ कर लो. No, I want to go through that and see what does it. If Buddha says 4 noble truths have to be done and this and that, then why not? So we need to really look at it in that way. Yeah. I don't know what is to be done. Let the expert come. I think so. Now for this kind of wise view, let me just complete this. There is this mention made in the Buddha's discourses. The proximate cause of wise view is yoniso manasikara. It means appropriate attention. And yoni actually means the root, the womb. So paying attention to the root of the problem. So you have to go and attend to this situation in a deep way. So that is seen, if you develop that practice of yoniso manasikara, that helps in development of right view or wise view, Sammaditthi. Okay?
What is the full translation of manasikara?
Manasikara means attention. Yoniso means appropriate, correct, going to the root. Paying attention to the experience in the depth, in its entire depth, and according to the teachings of the Buddha, paying attention in that manner.
You said excitement is also dukkha. Can you explain it in such a way?
I am not saying that. You tell me that, whether you feel it or not. My saying does not matter really, isn't it?
जब excitement होता है तब तो अच्छा ही लगता है.
अच्छा ही लगता है ना? So you just reflect on it deeply, create a memory of a past excitement and see what it does to the body. Just have a look at that. Just have a look at that. What does it do to the body? Does really body like it? Because body has its own intelligence, you see. The innate intelligence of the body actually keeps us alive. Otherwise तो हमारी intelligence से तो body का ऐसी वैसी पहले ही हो जाती. It automatically regulates gland operation, this temperature, pressure, blood pressure, सारे चीज़ें अपने आप regulate होती रहती हैं, isn't it? That is the intelligence of the body. That is the intelligence of the consciousness which operates through the body and keeps it in good shape for a long time, in spite of so much abuse we do to the body. So that innate intelligence will tell you whether it really likes it or not. So that is the way to know it. My saying it will not matter. So you should experience it yourself and see whether really excitement is something which the body really likes.
So body likes it, but the mind won't have this craving for that sensation again.
No, you try it out and see. Check it up. Check it up. Check it up and see. When there is excitement, what happens? The heartbeat will rise, and that's not a normal thing to happen, isn't it? And see the effects on the other organs, and the kind of, if you are given to some experience of peace sometime. But the problem happens when one doesn't have an experience of peace at all, then he doesn't have anything to compare with. That's usually the problem. So if the experience of peaceful living is not existing, then one feels that excitement is really something worth. So one needs to really, it's not true that we don't have moments of peace, that somebody is there in the world who has no moment of it. It's not true. There will be, but he is not mindful of that. That's the problem. So for us in this room who are meditators and practicing the path, we can see that there are moments when you are really peaceful. Maybe after meditation, maybe when you've got really inspired, or some things have happened which really quieten down the mind, then you can see that. And then use that as a datum to compare the other mental states.
But sir, kai bari, in that state of peace you were saying, even that creates a tanha, because it is such a good, calming down is such a good feeling that then you strive towards it.
That's where wise view comes in. That if you get attached to that, that is the origin of dukkha. Isn't it? That's why the pariyatti aspect helps us. It keeps us cautious. Okay, that's all right. It also is impermanent, will change. And if you attach to it, then you'll keep on searching for it. Rather than searching for money, now you search for peace. You search for happiness. Then again you're trapped.
Sir, in case of excitement, I have come over a situation where there was excitement due to any reason, some result, and I wanted to share with. I was searching for some close relative or close person with whom I can share that thought, that at that moment that happening. So that time I was restless to share with someone, and that kind of thing, excitement, that restless, it resulted in a restless condition. And only it appeared. No, it appears.
Very right. Very right. Restlessness is an innate characteristic of excitement. Just as some kind of depression is an innate characteristic of unpleasantness. Usually minor unpleasantnesses lead to that kind of a feeling in the mind. So this was something which one has to really experience and know. That this excitement has, as he has very rightly put, it is a base of restlessness in it. And if we really get attached to that, then there is a base of fear in it. Ye khatam ho jayega abhi. You go to a marriage party or a big party and then it starts ending, then you say, oh, it's about to end. Then the missing of that active of excitement already starts. So this needs more careful observation of the mind. So if you are more careful, we can figure it out, I'm sure. Karke dekhiye, then we can discuss it.
The base was all the adventurous thoughts.
One has to see what exactly one is doing, why one is doing it, isn't it? The reasons can be various. It can be to get yourself in Guinness book. It can be to ward off boredom. It can be to that the situation elsewhere is very troublesome, and here we are at least at peace, do whatever we like. So there can be a variety of reasons for it, really. So this is the next slide. I have tried to put down extracts from a sutta, Mahachattarika Sutta, where he talks of what is right view and what does it. There are different ways in which we understand right view. One way is it discerns what is skillful from unskillful, akushala and akushala. So it discerns wrong view as wrong view, right view as right view, wrong speech as wrong speech, right speech as right speech. Now this may seem very trivial to you, but if you reflect you'll see these are the things which really create suffering in our life. Our inability to see what is right speech and what is wrong speech. Our inability to see what is wrong livelihood and what is right livelihood. We mix it up. And then we try to be more pragmatic and try to be, how will we survive in this world with this kind of objective, with this kind of precepts, how can we live? So then we are really not able to discern rightly. And then next paragraph I have put down, why he says a wise view is the forerunner of all the 8 factors. It is the apex of this. Why? In one of right view, right resolve comes into being. In one of right resolve, right speech comes into being. In one of right speech, right action. In one of right action, right livelihood. In one of right livelihood, right effort. In one of right effort, right mindfulness. In one of right mindfulness, right concentration. In one of right concentration, right knowledge. In one of right knowledge, right release comes into being. So there is a circle, is a wheel which is going on and on and on. It can go in the direction of right, it can go in the direction of wrong. So it can keep on increasing suffering or keep on reducing suffering. And the right view is a very strong fulcrum point from the point of view of the way we look at the world, really. This is one classical definition which Buddha gives, insight knowledge for 4 noble truths. No? That's what I've tried to explain, which means it essentially leads to removal of ignorance and leads to liberation. But there is also what's called mundane right view. There's a discourse in which he talks of, same discourse, two kinds of right views. One which leads to liberation, other which leads to wholesome actions. So, and he says understanding the law of karma is the one which encourages wholesome actions. If we understand law of karma and we say that if I do unwholesome actions it will lead to suffering, if I do wholesome action I lead to at least avoid suffering. So it encourages wholesome action. So that is forms the base of Shila and living a life of ethics and morality. At least merely this understanding that if I do unwholesome actions, किसी को चोरी करूँगा या मारूँगा या शराब पीऊँगा तो उससे दुखी होगा. It will lead to suffering because that's the way law of karma works in this life or in the future. So that's what's really called the mundane world view, right view. Both of them are important. In the beginning, this forms the basis, and then we develop the insight knowledge of the 4 noble truths. In even more simple way, I would say we put it in this manner because we have discussed this issue of happiness. Again, something has gone wrong. So at least one thing we learned that Chromecast is not going to work. So we'll have to put a hard wire into it. So I think this question, if we all introspect, it will give us a good idea of really what the wise view means. Do you remember what we had talked of for various kinds of happiness? याद आप लोगों को किसी को? You remember we had talked various kinds of happinesses.
So कुछ तो worldly बताया था, worldly happiness and
some worldly, some otherworldly, some beyond otherworldly and all that, isn't it?
Right.
So so we must see what are we looking for.
Right.
You remember what are the worldly happinesses?
Yeah, one was like no debt and no blame. One was like
order में sequence is बहुत important है. First was earning wealth rightly. You should have earn, and the joy of being able to earn a good amount of money for family. Second, being able to use it for मतलब कई लोग हैं पैसा इकट्ठा करके भी यूज नहीं करेंगे. So using it for the family, using it for earning merit. Then what is the third? Remember? Third was Ananya Sukham, means debtlessness. कि कर्जा नहीं है कोई. Freedom from debt. That was the third. And what was the fourth?
Unvajj.
Blamelessness. कोई ब्लेम नहीं है, मैंने कोई ऐसा काम नहीं किया जिससे कि लोग मुझे बुरा कह सकेंगे, तो मैंने सारे शील पालन किए हैं. बेसिकली वही उस लेवल पे सारे शील पालन करता हूँ, तो कोई मुझे बुरा भला नहीं कह सकता है. So that's so and they are progressively of refined happinesses, earning wealth, spending it for good purposes, then not having any debt, that is subtle, and then blamelessness. So these are the 4 levels of worldly happiness. Then what was the other worldly happiness? No, that is already there in the second. Other kinds of other worldly happiness जो बताए गए थे. Jhanas, various jhanas, experience of deep meditation. First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth, and so on. So they give you more and more refined level of pleasant abiding, happiness. But that also is not the ultimate. What is the ultimate? Something beyond that, which meant removing freedom from greed, hatred and delusion. Rag, dvesh, moh se mukti. That he said is the acme of happiness. So, having seen all these things, understood, we need to introspect what kind of happiness am I looking for. And that will tell me where my view is stuck. So that's the practice we have to do really. So that is the kind of homework which we need to do for understanding wise view. What am I looking for? What kind of happiness am I looking for? Huh?
I know what you're looking for.
No, that you can find out. I'm sure people who have been meditating for years, if they calmly sit down, that's what basic idea is, to sit down calmly with a question and investigate. Don't do anything, don't think. You just sit up, experiment karke dekho. It's like an experiment, Just sit. I want to find out what is the thing which I am really looking for. What is it which drives me in this world? What is the main thing which, there must be many things I am looking for. It may not be just one. But you can find out, and what is the one to which I give the most important. I may be looking for wealth, I may be looking for serving, I may be looking for all of them. But what is it that I give most important? Then I prioritize them. So this kind of introspection is of tremendous value. Because that is what will determine our intensity of practice. That is what will determine in what जो आपको याद हो ना, मैं एक शब्द यूज किया था, धर्म संवेग. You remember? जो संवेग आएगा हमारी साधना में, वो तभी आएगा. हम ये सब करेंगे नहीं और सोचेंगे कि साधना करते रहेंगे हो जाएगा, वो नहीं होने वाला है. सो राइट व्यू तभी होगा जब हम इंट्रोस्पेक्ट करेंगे, मेरा अभी व्यू क्या है भाई. नहीं तो पता ही नहीं चलेगा. हमने पढ़ लिया, हमने सुन लिया, हाँ बहुत अच्छा है, भगवान बुद्ध ने ठीक ही कहा है, बहुत बढ़िया. बट इट डजंट मैटर, इट डजंट रियली गेट इन. It takes a long time. I should say it will take a very long time to get in. To be able to get it inside us, we need to introspect. What kind of happiness am I looking for? And wise view actually is you transcend the happiness. The happiness in the normal sense. जो हम सामान्य जीवन में गृहस्थ लोग जिसको happiness कहते हैं, we transcend it. We understand its limitations and say this is no longer my objective. I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for happiness of the worldly happiness. I'm not even looking for happiness of the other worldly happiness. I'm looking for freedom from craving, aversion. So that is what is meant by transcendence of happiness in the normal sense. Normally हम happiness तो उसी से associate करते हैं. So we transcend it. Transcend means happiness हो, unhappiness हो, बराबर है, कोई बात नहीं, चलता है. We understand. Now if you have really understood the notion of the truth of dukkha, first noble truth, अगर मुझे सचमुच में समझ में आ गया, तो it means I am already understood that search for happiness in this domain is not a wise thing to do. It's unwise. It is an unwise view to search for happiness in this domain because it lies elsewhere. There is that famous story of Nasruddin. You must have heard it, but it's worth remembering it here. That once he was in his home, एक वो थी छोटी सी गली थी, तो नीचे आँख ऐसे करके ढूंढ रहा था, तो कोई यंग आदमी है, क्या हुआ? कहता है बेटा मेरी चाबी खो गई है. तो कहता है अच्छा देखते हैं इधर, तो देखते यहाँ तो सारी लाइट है, इतनी अच्छी खासी रोशनी है, यहाँ दिख रहा है, कहाँ है चाबी यहाँ पे? कहता नहीं गिरी तो वहां पे थी, कहता गिरी वहां थी तो देख यहाँ क्यों रहा है, कहता वहां अंधेरा है ना, यहाँ लाइट है, अंधेरा लाइट में दिखाई देगा ना. So that's what we are doing really. So we need to see, that is what is meant by transcendence of happiness. We see that वहाँ अंधेरा छोड़ दो उसको. So then this is very important. So I would request you all to use this as the homework for this time.
Sir, after introspection, if I come to the conclusion that I want to have at all times calm and cool mind, and I feel that this is the it is the kind of happiness I am looking for. I am observing at all times sensations in the body, trying to look maximum time, and I feel that I am able to calm down my mind. I am having cool mind. Do you think that I am looking for the right?
One has to really see. So then once you say that you are looking for calming down of the mind, then you will study and investigate or meet people who have calmed their mind and find out how do I do it, isn't it? Or based on study we find out how do I calm down the mind and what exactly does it mean to calm down the mind. वो भी समझने की ज़रूरत है ना. Does it mean that my mind should become totally apathetic to the world? संसार में कुछ भी हो जाए मुझे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए, ऐसा मतलब है?
No, that way also I want to say.
So what I'm saying, I mean, the issue what I'm trying to suggest is that when we introspect and find out, and you put it in the context of Buddha's teaching, then you can match. You see, that's why the crucial aspect of pariyatti, that if I am able to put my experience in the paradigm of Buddha's teaching, I can check up कि कहाँ मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग उससे मैच करती है या नहीं मैच करती है, and then I can correct it if need be. If I have an understanding that I want that my mind should be absolutely calm and quiet and nothing, then I should see whether that is what Buddha wants us to do or not, and whether that will be achievable, how to achieve it, then I should investigate and find out that. And once I study deeply, then I understand what does it mean to transcend happiness. It means whether the mind is agitated, whether the mind is calm, it doesn't matter.
By way of...
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not something why we have to do it. It's the innate yearning of the human being. It's not something you are doing it, isn't it? The innate structure of human beings, innate structure of, you can say, consciousness is such that it wants to abide in happiness and peace and joy and calm and quiet. And anything else creates distress, isn't it? So that's the way. After all, why do we say that a fish should remain in water? Because when it goes out of water, it is extremely turbulent, it's painful, it's very painful, isn't it? It shivers and trembles and wants to rush and goes back to the water because that is its natural natural abode where it can be at peace.
So what happiness we know are so worldly happiness.
Yeah, that's why I said, that's why I use the apostrophes here, transcendence of that kind of happiness. Yeah. So the one which we are used to, we should come to a state with the unwise view means we understand first noble truth, which means we understand that happiness is good and as Ajahn Chah beautifully says, happiness is good and happiness is also good. So there's no issue. Okay?
सर एक हैप्पीनेस का एक राइट व्यू का हमने बात किया था जिसमें वी सेड डूइंग होलसम एक्शंस कि हम बुरे काम इसलिए नहीं करेंगे कि हमारा मंडेन व्यू जो था कम्मा के उससे, बट वो तो आउट ऑफ फियर है, अंडरस्टैंडिंग लॉ ऑफ कम्मा विच इनकरेजेस होलसम एक्शन, बट ये तो बेसिकली फियर है कि मैंने राइट एक्शन इसलिए करना है क्योंकि नहीं तो ऐसा हो जाएगा, नहीं तो इसका बेस तो फियर हो गया.
You remember that we had said there are fear by itself need not be unwholesome attribute. You remember? There is a moral fear and a moral shame. They are iri and otappa. They are wholesome qualities. Actually, Buddha goes on to say that the order in this cosmos is maintained only because of those two qualities. If everybody gives up those qualities, there will be anarchy in the world. So, संसार में जी नहीं पाएंगे आप. He says they are the guardians of. These are the words he uses. They are the guardians of the world. To the extent people have those moral shame and moral dread, society is in some semblance of an order. When those both vanish, there will be anything will happen. So, fear of wrongdoing is a wholesome thing. If you remember the qualities of गिरिमानंद सूत्र, आपको शायद याद हो कि नहीं, उसमें जो संज्ञाएं कही जाती है 10 संज्ञा की बात है, उसमें एक आदीनव संज्ञा आती है, सीइंग डेंजर इन द वर्ल्डली एंटरप्राइज, बिकॉज दैट इज व्हाट विल प्रोपेल अस टू मूव अवे फ्रॉम दिस. कि हम देखते हैं संसार में बड़ा खतरा है भाई, इस संसार के चक्कर में पड़ोगे तो खतरा है, तो इससे ऊपर उठने की दूर करो. ऊपर उठने का मतलब ये नहीं कि भाग जाओ, दैट यू लिव इन द वर्ल्ड बट यू अंडरस्टैंड इट्स लिमिटेशंस एंड देन you are ready to accept both positivity and so-called positivity and so-called negativity, so-called happiness and so-called unhappiness. And the example जैसे दी जाती है ना सामान्यता, आंसर में तो भी देते हैं कि भाई एक समुद्र है, उसमें ऊपर ऊपर तरंगे हो रही हैं, but at the depth it is calm and quiet. So that's the understanding of a mind free from craving, aversion and delusion. Because even in an ocean, if you put a pebble, there will be some ripples. It's not that a aran becomes a stone. कि आप उसे पत्थर फेंको तो कुछ नहीं होगा, ऐसा नहीं. And that's the way we have been taught, and that's the way we have seen people. And that's what we see even from teachings of the Buddha. His own, मैंने पहले भी example भी दिया था उनके. Though he is of course the acme of detachment from the world, but he's not apathetic, he's not free from compassion and free from feeling sense of loss when somebody important is lost, and they pass away. He needs a sense of loss, so that's it.
So can I ask, can we go to the next slide, sir?
Next.
So as I introspect, what I am looking for is the suffering that I have in my life that should end. So in that context,
that has already ended. You have to please understand. The suffering you have had in your life is ended.
The suffering that I have in my life.
I have today, at this moment. It's very important. It's very important to not make a continuity of the experience. They are all discrete experiences. At this moment, at this particular moment, tell me what is the suffering?
I have suffering.
What? Tell me.
I have
at
agitation.
This moment.
I have agitation.
So there is at this moment mind is agitated. Okay. So that much is there. Not past, not future. Okay. Not that this will happen in future or that I have gone through so much suffering. I'm not trivializing. I know you so well, so I'm not trivializing it. I'm just trying to tell you the wise view. Because if you hold on to that past huge suffering which you have or which anybody has or which I have had, if I hold on to that, I'll be just finished. It's gone, finished. At this moment, what is there? Okay, my heartbeat is very high. Alright, that's okay. That's the reality of the moment. That's not suffering, that's an unpleasant occurrence. Okay, that's not suffering. Okay, the mind is agitated, that's an experience of restlessness. And just okay, why make it suffering out of it? Now that's the way you have to work. There is an experience of restlessness, okay, or there is an experience of anxiety. All right, there is an experience of anxiety. This is first noble truth. I sit and see. This is what is anxiety, and observe what it does to me.
आपने कहा why make a suffering out of it? क्या मतलब है?
That anxiety is an experience. It is an unpleasant experience. It is an unpleasant feeling. It becomes suffering when you don't like it. It doesn't become suffering otherwise.
Right.
You get my point?
Right.
I gave you an example. No? My heartbeat is very high, sir, at this moment. It's not, unfortunately, not. It was in the morning. So I had two options. Either I say suffer and cry, or I just observe, okay, it's high, that's fine, let's see. Okay. It's unpleasant, okay, and you take medicine, you have to take medicine, and then things will happen. We'll see what happens. Because if we don't work, especially when the suffering is prolonged, if you don't work from moment to moment, there will be problem. Because you keep on accumulating that, and you keep on grasping the past, then there's no way to get out of it. So what is the way to get out of it is, sit under it. Okay, there is anxiety in the mind at this moment. Let me sit and see what it does to me. There's a feeling, unpleasant feeling in the mind. There's no doubt. But I'm just aware of it. Why do I make it into suffering? Suffering would happen when I say, oh, this should not be there. Oh, why am I only suffering? Others are not suffering. No, that's how suffering arises. That's how Trishna arises, from feeling. Vedana pachya tanha. So you observe Vedana, and Vedana can be very unpleasant. So you just be aware of it. There is unpleasantness, but it doesn't become mental suffering. No? There is one dart. You remember that two arrow analogy? One arrow is anyway there, that all of us have to experience. But we don't put another arrow into it.
तो इस संदर्भ में and in my case, can you explain transcendence of happiness? इसका
The issue is that will happen when one is attached to happiness. In this particular case, the attachment to calmness, attachment to non-anxiety. So in a way, non-anxiety is equated to happiness, and therefore anxiety becomes unhappiness. So when you say transcendence of happiness, means you transcend the difference between anxiety and non-anxiety. Just okay. So now that's the kind of clarity we have to develop. And I'm not saying it's easy, but that's the way out of it. Everything else is escaping from it. Everything else is escaping. Of course, some cases that also is needed. If it is enormous anxiety, you take medicine, okay. You accept it. But to the extent possible, we try to observe it. Even after taking medicine, one can observe it. Okay. See, this anxiety increasing, decreasing, increasing, decreasing, so that we keep a distance from that. We don't take it as me, mine.
I have a small query. Just wanted to further understand this present talk. If you are in an environment which is minute to minute or moment to moment producing unhappiness because of whatever reasons, and you want to remain, you want to go beyond that. So one is that you become completely, you don't react to whatever is happening around you. You are not a party to it. So you don't say anything, you don't do anything about it. So you become a passive, completely a passive person, which may further, degenerate into something which is rebounding again on you, that you have become completely passive and you are not reacting at all. So in such circumstances, though I am trying to be, completely normal, understand everything which is going around and not try to react, and so I am trying to be even beyond happiness, but how does one handle such a situation?
See, when we have a dose of continuous unpleasantness in the life, the very first thing which, in my opinion, and as you know, we all shared that, we have had enough occasions of that continuous unhappiness for decades, leave aside days. Now, the only way we can really respond to it in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha is, the very first thing is to understand that this is the result of my karma. Now that's a very big issue. Because apparently the causes are there. Apparently this person is the cause.
I'm already right.
I am not the cause. यार मैं तो इतना भला आदमी हूँ. No, that is if one can accept it, that is enough to break the whole edifice falls down. Because then our response will be different, our way of looking at it will be different, our understanding will be different, and sometimes we'll fail also. That's okay. That's quite natural. We can't remain. We're not arahants. We're not perfected beings. We'll fail also. But if we have that understanding of Dhamma, that I am a human being and all this is happening because of my karma, so let me not add more fuel to the fire. Sahan kar lo bhai chupchap. And follow the first noble truth. There is suffering, obviously. There is suffering, there is no denial, and it has to be understood. So first thing which you understand is, it is a result of my karma. Whatever experience I have, as we had discussed earlier, vipaka chitta. कुछ भी experience हो, वो तो ये कहते हैं कुछ भी experience हो, वो विपाक चित्त ही है, मेरे कर्मों का फल ही है, वो even things I see, things I hear, even such things. So obviously what is continuously is the effect of my karma, and then I understand that I should not add to it, to make sure that at least it reduces, it doesn't increase for future. Once we understand that, then these things become easy to do. If we don't understand that, then it becomes easy to find solution there. And finding solution there is very difficult.
But suddenly suppose somebody enters and wants to do, and you start thinking it is the result of my karma.
Excuse me, use the mic.
And what?
She wants you to use the mic.
If somebody comes and immediately you are in a situation that he is shooting you, and if you just start thinking that it is a result of my own karma, he will kill you.
No, it doesn't mean I will not do action. I didn't say that you don't do action. I said you first understand that whatever is happening is going to happen because of my karma. So that I don't create aversion towards it. I don't create a mindset which is upset and anxiety and all that. Then I find a solution for it. If it is possible, fine. If it's not possible, okay. If 10 terrorists come here, what will we do? Okay. Be prepared and die. That's it.
Because many times they say that the cause of downfall of India was basically the misinterpretation of teaching of Buddhism.
Yeah, that's true.
Non-violence.
That's true.
And when the Muslims came and they attacked the temples, they were thinking it is a karma and God will come and protect us.
No, that is wrong. This up to the point it is karma is right. Beyond that is wrong. Beyond that is wrong. Because the regulations for monks and regulations for lay people are different. For the monks it is said that if people come and saw your hands from two sides, you have to just observe it and see and not create aversion toward the situation. It's something like what we hear about Jesus Christ, that he is being executed, crucified, and he is just observing and saying, you may be forgiven for doing such unholy action. But that's not what is expected from lay people. Lay people are supposed to protect. Kings are supposed to protect. Kings are supposed to have armies. They are supposed to protect the nation. That is their duty. So we cannot conflate the two things. Kings are supposed to have wealth. Monks are not supposed to have wealth. Monks are supposed to not to keep any money. Unfortunately, we have the opposite thing. Householder से वो हमको पैसा नहीं चाहिए और monks से हमको पैसा चाहिए, तो society will fall into disrepute. So it is a misunderstanding of the issue about action and reaction. What Buddha is saying is don't react, but he's not saying don't act. We will act anyway. You can see that simple example of a house on fire, which I think there have been some instances also of that kind. कि एक आदमी घर पे सो रहा था और आग लग गई, और जब वो जागा तो उसने देखा घर तो जल रहा है चारों तरफ से. अब क्या करें? एक तरीका है कि वो डर गया और चीखने चिल्लाने लगा, आग आग आग. लोग बाहर खड़े हैं, आग लग रही है, हम अंदर कैसे जाएंगे? There is nothing we can do it. In contrast, there have been cases where a person saw, there is fire. What should I do? Is there some way out? He's not frightened, he's not overwhelmed. To the extent possible, then कुछ उसका दिमाग रह गया समा होश में कि चलो देखूं मैं कोई तरीका है कि नहीं. तो कोई तरीका होगा तो कोशिश करेगा, खिड़की तोड़ेगा, दिमाग तोड़ेगा, ये करेगा, वो करेगा, otherwise he will just cry and die. This is exactly what happened in Upar. If you must have known about Upar tragedy. It was not a big fire. It was essentially smoke which arose, और गेट एक था, हर आदमी कहता मैं ही पहले जाऊंगा. And they just fought with each other and trampled each other there. वो एक गेट से बाहर ही नहीं निकल पाए. If they had not panicked, some people would have fallen ill. At least they would not have died. They would have definitely fallen ill. स्मोक भर रहा है, दिमाग हो रहा है, सिर फट रहा है. आराम से अगर वो शांति से रह पाते तो एक करके निकल जाते. कोई ऐसी ब्लेज तो थी नहीं. It was not like gas fire कि सारी बिल्डिंग जल रही थी. There was fire somewhere outside and the smoke was coming into the building and the door was open. One door was open. So basically, because they got overwhelmed by fear and by reactive response, they could not even do the correct response. So that is what is really meant, that we accept the situation and then do appropriate action, not reaction, because reaction is always out of fear or anxiety or anger, and that is usually bereft of wisdom. क्योंकि जब हमने react किया तो हमारी wisdom, जो common wisdom है वो भी available नहीं हो पाती है. So that is the point being made.
With logic you cannot stop the reaction. Okay, with understanding everything is possible with understanding.
हाँ जी.
If everything is possible with understanding, then all the intelligent people are the all top educationists. They should not feel angry. They know, everybody knows that anger is bad.
That's why I'm saying this word to be understood does not mean intellectual understanding. That's why I said, what did we say? How to understand dukkha? लो अंग्रेजी में कोई और शब्द है नहीं ना, परिन्याय है, मैं क्या ट्रांसलेशन करूँ उसका. वो हमने कैसे कहा कि क्या करना चाहिए? We should sit under it. We didn't say we think about it. No thinking. We should sit under it. Means experience it actually. And on the basis of experience, we find a cause and the solution of it. So it's not intellectual thinking.
But
that will never solve.
Once the situation happens, it is your state of consciousness which is going to...
Very true. Very true.
Not the understanding.
No. State of consciousness arrives from understanding, not from otherwise. If my understanding is, basically it is practice of mindfulness, practice of the eightfold path. If you practice it again and again and again, then the mind becomes tuned to that way of living, and then one can do that process. It is not intellectual understanding at all, because that will not be of any help. Real help will come when we have practiced that way as explained, through experience. We actually experience suffering, actually experience its effects, actually experience the cause for it, actually experience the cessation of it. So we have by experience understood, हाँ मैं कर सकता हूँ इसको. एक बार, दो बार, तीन बार, 10 बार करके देख लिया तो कॉन्फिडेंस हो जाता है कि हाँ मैं इसको अब हैंडल कर सकता हूँ. कुछ भी हो जाए ज़िंदगी में मैं हैंडल कर लूँगा.
There are other techniques, like here we try to understand, try to develop insight and then try to overcome it. There are other methods like there are bhakti yoga, people are only reciting mantra yoga, they don't try to bother about what is the cause of dukkha, and ultimately they reach a state where they are able to overcome everything.
Yeah, that's what it seems, right, you're right. But there are differences which are very subtle. आज सुबह ही इनसे बात कर रहा था मैं. We were studying about the 112 ways of Lord Shiva. So there are differences of very subtle kind. तो आप कभी interested होंगे तो I can sit with you and discuss, because I have tried to, before doing Buddhist path, I have followed the other paths to quite a good extent.
Because what I have understood from all these years of experience, that our consciousness is split into two. One is pure consciousness and one is the dynamic aspect, which you may call it Shabad or Kundalini or whatever name you give it. And if whenever you are doing any meditation, when you try to get awareness of that dynamic aspect of the consciousness which is working, and when you get in tune with that, then the things start improving, your level of consciousness improve, and all these things, they start coming of their own. and with little bit of understanding and insight meditation, then one can overcome it.
I'll just make one point and not go into details of it. You see, when we practice concentration, which is also one of the parts of it, and deep absorption, जैसे अभी मैंने झाना की बात कही थी ना, otherworldly happiness. When we practice them properly, the defilements which arise, impurities, they get suppressed. So they get temporarily suppressed, and then when we practice it very deeply, they get completely suppressed. They will not arise for days and months, but they are not removed. So one may have a great experience of bliss and may enjoy it for a long time, but still deep inside those unwholesome tendencies remain in the mind. And the insight development and the path of Buddha points out to the removal of those latent tendencies in the mind, which cannot be removed by practices of deep samadhi. So that is the key difference between the traditional practices and traditional meditative practices and her. Of course, if one practices devotion with an understanding, with a deep understanding of emptiness, with a deep understanding of non-self, one would reach the same conclusion. If one can practice with that deep understanding, But if the devotion is blind, then there's very little chance.
They reach a particular state,
yeah.
Because devotion is one of the means to achieve a samadhi. When you are able to, ultimately it is an experience of emptiness. In Buddhism we give it the name of emptiness, while in other religion they call it samadhi. It is because the truth has to be one, it cannot be two. Truth has to be one.
That's true, but
ultimately even in samadhi it is only a difference of name.
No, there's a difference. Maybe we can discuss it, I can discuss with you in deep depth, because I've spent years in figuring it out, really. So I can discuss with you, because it's a very subtle subject, so it's not, others may not find it useful to discuss. There's a very subtle difference between them, and it is the Buddha who really actually points it out where exactly the difference is. So we can sit some time and discuss it.
Sir, one question, when we were talking about bhakti, the concept of surrender takes you towards understanding of dukkha. You can say that there is some similarity in that.
You see, if the surrender is unequivocal and the sense of self is lost, then you are very near the ultimate goal. If the sense of self is truly lost, not suppressed, now there's a difference, There's a difference. If the sense of self is truly lost, if you read Bulle Shah, for example, you will see that mentions that the what is the word he uses? Aapko yaad hai? Gal nahi mukdi. There's one very beautiful stance that unless the sense of self is not lost, nothing will work. Whether you go to Makkah, you go to Gangaya, you go to Ganga, there's that famous, आज हम सुन रहे थे कार में जब आ रहे थे, that you do whatever you like.
मैं को दिलों ना बगाया, गल नहीं बुझी.
There's some beautiful phrase he uses, that unless that sense of self is not removed, the sense of self as a devotee is also a sense of self. Now that's so difficult to see. I am a devotee means I am there. So even that has to be transcended. So that needs, that's why that said, even in Buddha's teaching, Shraddha is the first bala, but it has to be balanced with wisdom. They have to be balanced together. So there have been saints who have been able to figure it out. So who have been able to see the crux of suffering lies in the sense of self, the notion that I am. Not only the notion, not just the pride. Pride is a very gross thing. Even just the subtle notion that I am an individual, or even the notion that I am nothing. There's a subtle thing. Even the notion, I am nothing, God is everything. But you are still having that notion that there is something called I, which is nothing. So that it becomes very subtle to really figure it out, what exactly that sense of...
The sense of self will only be lost once our consciousness becomes cosmic. Otherwise it cannot be lost.
No, this is...
My my consciousness is limited to my body, that sense of I will always persist. It is only by doing sadhana when you reach a state where your consciousness merges with the cosmic.
Yeah, you can say so, but actually there is nothing like my consciousness and cosmic consciousness, because consciousness by nature is immaterial, and anything which is immaterial does not have anything, space, any time, it doesn't have any such thing. So there is nothing like my consciousness and his consciousness.
In the times the consciousness is localized to my body, my frame.
Yeah.
The ego is only that. It is not, because a person may be very humble by behavior and experience, still that ego persists.
Yeah.
It is only when that...
There's that famous joke of a professor when he was dying. He was a very eminent person, and some of his students came and well-wishers came, and they were praising him in front of others that he was such a wonderful person, such a nice person, and so scholarly, so nice to talk to, always kind and compassionate. And then he calls one of his students and says, "Don't forget to mention my humility." So you can see the trap. You can see the trap where you're caught. Similarly, there's one similar comment made in one of the teachings of, I forget, one of the very famous saints of India. He talks about a Mahant and his disciple. They are giving a talk in an auditorium, and they end it, "God, you are everything, I am nothing." So at the end, in great ecstasy, the man says, the teacher who is teaching, very supposedly a great learned person, says, "God, you are everything, I am nothing." And his disciple also says, "Yes, I am also nothing, you are everything." So then there is a gatekeeper sitting here. He also says, "God, I am nothing, you are everything, I am nothing." So the man says to his disciple, "Look, who is saying he is nothing?" So you can see where we trap, how we can get trapped. So it's such a subtle thing that we have to really break it in a very careful way to be able to see it. So these stories help us actually to see where we can be trapped. Good, so I think we'll stop here. We'll do our obeisance to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha.